Hello everyone, it's Franci, and today we are talking about the ceramics created in the Japanese archipelago during the Yayoi period. These are prehistoric ceramic. They're rather simple, however we are going to see how they shaped and supported the creation and the development of a fully agrarian society in the archipelago. So let's jump right in. So what we call today the Yayoi period is a time period which spans from 300 before Common Era until 300 of the Common Era. And during this time, a new people, new culture had come to the Japanese archipelago from the East Asian continent, from the Korean peninsula. And they coexisted to a certain extent with the people who already inhabited the archipelago, the Jōmon. However, eventually their culture came to dominate. The Yayoi brought from the East Asian continent a wealth of new technologies, of innovation. We talked in my last video about their metalwork and their bronze artifacts. However, they still used a lot of ceramics. Ceramics was still a staple of daily life. So much so that actually the name Yayoi is derived from the district in Tokyo in which ceramics from this time period were actually excavated and discovered. So the Yayoi created a variety of vessels and different types of ceramic objects which serve their daily lives. For example, these stemmed bowls used for serving food. But one kind of vessel that we're going to see today again and again is these jars with a thin neck and a pot belly. They will be kind of the main object of today's video, and in my mind they almost came to represent Yayoi ceramic production. Just like with the preceding ceramic productions of the archipelago, for example the ceramics created by the Jōmon, the ceramics created during the Yayoi period as well were created by using a coiling technique where most vessels were made by stacking coils of clay onto each other and then smoothing the surface. And again, just like during the Jōmon, they were made of unglazed earthenware and firing open fires or pit kilns. However, compared to the Jōmon ceramics, they are thinner and also they were fired at higher temperatures, which makes them harder, more durable, and also gives them a kind of lighter color. Certain Yayoi ceramics exhibit patterns of cord marks for decoration. For example, this jar from the collection of the Tokyo National Museum, which features a cord mark decoration in bands on its belly and its neck. And if you watch my previous videos, you may remember cord marks that are reminiscent also of the ceramics of the Jōmon period. And when we look at Yayoi ceramics and we find commonalities with the Jōmon ceramics, what we have to keep in mind is that the Yayoi people, the Yayoi culture didn't immediately take over and displace the Jōmon overnight. Actually, these two people and these two cultures coexisted for a certain amount of time. So in many cases and in some of regions of Japan, the two cultures and the two artistic traditions blended with each other. In fact, I did mention in my previous video about metalwork that metalwork was going to be a topic of innovation, while with ceramics we were going to see a certain continuity with the previous artistic traditions of the archipelago. Incised line work was also used to decorate the pots, and it was achieved by using a variety of tools and techniques, for example, by running comb teeth over semi-dry clay. We're seeing an example of incised line work on this jar from the collection of the Portland Art Museum, which features thin bands of diagonal incised lines and larger bands of straight lines in the upper half of its body. And looking at this vessel, we can see how this incised line work decoration was geometrical in style and limited to certain parts of the vessel. It is kind of restrained as far as decoration goes, and because of this it is believed that it may have had actually practical functions rather than simply aesthetic functions. For example, helping with gripping the jar or signaling ownership. Another technique used when creating yayoi vessel that we often find is burnishing. This means polishing the surface of the pot by using a tool with a hard and smooth surface, such as a wooden or bone spatula or a smooth stone, and this is done before firing, and it creates a smooth, glossy finish and a kind of sheen. Then we can see, for example, on this jar from the collection of the Met Museum, which presents this glossy red body with an incised decoration. And again, we can see that burnishing did indeed create a beautiful glossy finish of the ceramic, but also it created a surface which was less porous and so more sturdy and better for containing liquids or cooking or storing food. So again, it had both aesthetic, but even more importantly, a practical reason. So now I want to show you this kind of jar. This is a type of jar with a decoration of a human face on the top of its neck. Vessels like this were produced particularly in Eastern Japan during the Yayoi period, and generally they are rather big. For example, this one that we're looking at from the collection of the Tokyo National Museum measures almost 70 centimeters tall, and it is characterized by this three-dimensional human face, which features eyebrows, nose, mouth, chin, and ears, and also a pattern resembling a tattoo engraved around the eyes and mouth. Many of these jars were actually found in burials, so it is believed that they were used to contain bones of the deceased. And actually it is believed that they were used for reburial rituals, which means that a deceased person had been buried, and then after some time the remains were excavated, the bones were collected and put in this type of jar and then buried again. And it is believed that the faces pictured on the jar do not represent any particular individual. They do not represent the likeness of the deceased person, but actually they may represent spirits of ancestors. By looking at these jars, you may see the facial features, and it might be tempting to connect them to the Jōmon tradition of creating dogu with human-like features. However, most dogu were actually female. They featured female attributes. However, this tradition of creating sculptures with female attributes kind of faded after the Jōmon period, and we do not find any female attributes on these jars. And also it is believed that many of the dogu may have been used for rituals which had to do with a safe childbirth and fertility. However, these jars can have a different use, which was that of being used for burials. So looking at this type of jar with a human face, we can also see that the majority of the decoration is limited to the upper part of the jar where we find the face, but the rest of the vessel is rather simple. So in general, we have seen that these yayoi jars are characterized by a rather simple appearance, a limited and restrained amount of decoration. So it seems that the focus was that of functionality and practicality. So it seems that from the Jōmon to the yayoi, the focus of ceramic creation had gone from ornamentation and decoration to simplicity, practicality, and function. For example, storing foods and practical sturdy objects with practical decorations. And as we see this shift in the ceramic production, we also find a shift in the way of life on the archipelago, because we see a transition from semi-sedentary, so semi-nomadic, early agrarian society with limited amounts of agriculture to a society during the Yayoi period which is fully sedentary and fully agrarian. So we said that during the Yayoi period, rice cultivation was developed in earnest fully in the archipelago, and it became a kind of the staple, the base of Yayoi life. So what we can imagine is that there was less time to dedicate to pottery production. Pottery had to be created faster in higher quantities to be able to store the surplus food. And also these vessels used for storage became more standardized to be able to rely on them. So all these Yayoi ceramics explored how they were functional, they were practical, they supported the lifestyle of the Yayoi period and in a way helped shape the Yayoi culture. However, what about aesthetics? This is an art history channel, so in a way, I feel it's natural to ask, how do we consider these objects as art? Where do they fit in the history of art and aesthetics of the Japanese archipelago? So what I think is that we can easily appreciate Yayoi ceramics. We can appreciate the symmetrical nature of these wares, the deliberate use of pigment, and the placement of geometrical decorations in these balanced, restrained compositions. We can also enjoy the way that burnishing enhanced the natural beauty of the clay, and the simple forms as well let the actual texture of the clay shine. All of these emphasize the natural beauty of the material in itself over the decoration, which is where I think the beauty of these wares lies. So this is it for today's video. I hope that you enjoyed watching, and I hope that you enjoyed Yayoi ceramics and you found them beautiful as I do. As always, I'd love it if you left me a comment or a like. Just let me know what you think, if you have any questions as well. And we are on a journey through Japanese art history on this channel, so make sure to subscribe to see where we're going next. And if you do want to support the channel, there's links in the description to do so. But for now, I just want to thank you again so much for watching, for making it till here, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!